Hi there and welcome to my Trimester 2 beginner workout number 1. For today's workout, the only thing you're going to be needing is a chair. So hopefully it's a sturdy but light movable chair that you have access to. If you can gather that up, we'll get started. As per usual, all my workouts can be divided up into small chunks, or you can do the video in its entirety. So we're going to get started into our dynamic warm-up and active stretches, or dynamic stretches, yoga-based and athletic type stretches. Very basic because this is a beginner level. Then we'll go into some core and posture work. That's section number 2. Section number 3 and 4, I always do 2 functional series. So those are larger body, full body type movements, requiring strength and some coordination. And as well, they're truer to real life movements. And then we finish off with some stretching. So you can either choose to do different chunks of the workout, or you can do the workout in its entirety. I always recommend that you always do the active warm-up and dynamic stretching with me. And whatever chunks you want to do after that are up to you. As well, however, I do recommend that you always spend some time at some point in your day doing some stretching, as that is very important during your pregnancy. Okay, so let's get started right into that active warm-up. So because this is a beginner workout, we'll keep it very basic. What I want you to do is to imagine that there's a line on the ground, and I want you to step forward and backward over top of that line. We'll start with the right foot lead, and we're going small steps forward. Good. And let's take those steps, try to make them bigger. So we're going to go forward and backwards, a little bit bigger steps, moving forward and backward over top of that line. As we're doing this, let's start thinking a little bit about our core. Occasionally, what I'm going to talk about is drawing that belly button in. So if you're familiar with that, do a gentle drawing of the belly button. We'll be focusing as well when we do the core activation, belly breathing. So you can feel the opposite of that drawing the belly button in. We want to be able to do both expanding the belly, but then drawing the belly in when it's appropriate. And then take it to the left. So small steps over top of that imaginary line. Function of the active warm-up is just to start to get the blood pumping, build a little bit of temperature or heat in the body so the dynamic stretching is easier. And make those steps nice and big, forward and back. Nice and big, forward and back. Good. Now if you don't want to do this stepping type movement, and instead you have an exercise bike available to you, or a treadmill at home, or at the gym, and you prefer to do 10 minutes on that before we jump into the dynamic stretching, that's fine too. Assumption is, beginner workout, you don't have much equipment available to you. Okay, let's go back on the spot. Imagine that you've got now a line cutting through the middle of your body. You're going to go out, out, and in towards that line. Out, out, in. Out, out, in. Right foot lead to start. Good. And make nice wide steps if it feels comfortable. Start trying to make sure that your knees don't collapse in. I'll be using that cue. Today we're going to be doing, later in the workout, some sumo squats and some basic chair squats. I'll talk about knee tracking a little bit. One more, and let's switch left leg lead. Out, out, in. Left leg lead. But don't worry, if you're not into it, I don't do any dance type moves. So you should feel nice and comfortable. Out, out, in. Good. 3, 2, and 1. Okay, speaking of squats, let's just start a little bit of very, very basic squat. Don't go too deep. We'll just talk a little bit about what a squatting movement does, or what it is, feet shoulder width apart. And you're just going to do small little baby squats. Because this is our warm-up, I'm not going to have you go too deep. We're just basically getting some active movement in here. As my bum pushes back, my hands reach forward. So bum pushes back, just a small little range of motion here, what feels comfortable for you. Good, and into some dynamic stretching. So body hopefully should be a little bit warm by now. It'll continue to get warm as we do our dynamic stretching. So what I would like you to do is to kneel on the ground. I want you to step 1 foot forward. So I've got my hands on either side of that foot. I bring my knee back until I feel a little bit of a pull, but a comfortable pull in that back thigh. Now, depending on your balance here, what you may want to do is place that inside hand on the thigh, and you may just want to lift the inside hand up. And what you should feel is as you do that, you get a little bit of a stretch in through that back hip flexor. So that's the hip flexor back there. And we're going to go 4 more of those. 1, 2. Should feel no strain in your low back here. If you feel any strain in your low back, what you want to do is release out of that lunge just a little bit and squeeze your bum cheeks to get more of that hip flexor stretch. Place the hands on either side of that foot, and now what I want you to do is to bring your hips backwards, lifting that front toe off the ground. Now I feel a comfortable pull in through that front hamstring. And then I release forward, and then bring the hips back. Release forward. So you've heard of ballistic stretching. This is not ballistic stretching, this is dynamic stretching. Ballistic stretching is more aggressive, it's quicker, and you're not always fully in control of your movements. Whereas with dynamic stretching, it's done nice and slow in control of all your movements. And let's do one more here. And take the hand on the inside, swing that leg back, switch over to the other side. So again, how far apart your legs are is determined by when you start to feel a stretch in this back thigh. So I keep wiggling that back knee back until I just ever so slightly feel a stretch in here. If you're tight in your front hamstring, you might feel that a little bit too, which is okay. And then from here, brace yourself on that front knee so you feel balanced. And then we're going to reach the back hand up. If you have to do a little balance check, that's okay. If you really find this difficult to balance, what you can do is you can place a ball or a chair or a couch nice and close by so you can lean on that instead of leaning on your front thigh. 3, 2, and 1. Take the hands on the inside of that leg. Oh, sorry, one hand on either side of that leg, and then what I want you to do is to gently shift your bum backwards, pulling the front toe up until you feel a bit of a pull through that front leg, and then release. Shift back and release. Shift back and release. Let's go 3 more. 1, 2. So far we've done the hip flexor, so the front of the thigh, the back of the thigh. Let's bring that leg back. Let's go into a modified child's pose. So what I'm going to have you do is you're going to splay your legs. So as your belly gets bigger, you'll be able to accommodate this. And this is just a nice variation of this pose. I want you to drop your forehead onto the ground, wiggle your fingertips forward. Take 2 or 3 deep breaths here. So you might feel a little bit of a stretch in your groin. You might feel a little bit of relaxation through your back, and depending on how tight you are in your lats, you might feel a bit of a stretch under here. To accentuate that stretch, what we're going to do and get it down the side body, we're going to reach our hands to one side, take a deep breath, and then walk our hands over to the other side. And take 1 or 2 deep breaths. And we'll repeat that on each side one more time. Walking over to the side. Shoelaces are tucked under, deep breath, and over to the other side. Okay, and let's get that trusty chair out. So now we want to stretch out our hips on the other side. So, or on the opposite to the groin there, which we just did. You're going to sit on your chair. I'm going to show you in future videos a little bit more advanced version of this. But to get a dynamic glute stretch, what you're going to do is you're going to cross one leg over top of the other, sit up nice and tall. Some people, your knee's going to be way up here depending on how tight you are. Other people, it'll be quite loose. And then in order to accentuate the stretch or feel it a little bit more, you can hinge forward. You may not feel like you need to do a little hinge. If you're really tight and you feel it, then to make it dynamic, release out of the stretch and then just come forward to the point where you feel the stretch. So I do want you, for the beginning stretches, moving in and out. At the end of the workout, we always do what are called static stretches where we're holding for longer. But we want to keep the nervous system active and we want to keep the body warm. So that's why I keep the warm up nice and dynamic. And then we switch it to the other side. Again, sitting up nice and tall. Make sure there should be no strain in the knee. Where I'm feeling the pull is back in this area here. 3, 2, and last one. Okay, last but not least, we'll do a tiny bit of balance work and calf stretching here. So we've got the chair already prepared. I want the left leg nice and close to that chair, slight knee bend in that left, and we're gonna push into that back right calf. I can press against the chair to get a little bit more pressure through there, and then release, push into that back calf, and one more, push into that back calf. So that's not balance work, I know that's just getting a little bit of a stretch in the back calf. And again, push. If you feel like you're not getting or feeling the stretch, double check the position of your back foot. If it's off on an angle, you won't feel a stretch. It's got to be straight back. And if you feel like you can't get enough pressure from the chair, feel free to do this up against a wall. And last but not least, this is where we're going to work on our balance. Come away from the chair. We're going to do what I would call a deadlift hip hinge or an airplane. We want to feel a bit of a stretch at the back of this leg, and we're working on balance here. So standing up nice and tall, the chair's there to assist us with balance. I want you to try to hinge forward until you balance on the chair and go down as far as you can until you comfortably feel a pull through there. I'm balancing on the chair. If I feel I can go my own balance, then I come back up. So let's finesse that movement and talk about form. Bottom leg is almost straight, but not quite, a little bit of a soft bend. Hips, check out the hips here. I'm not open, I've got my hips nice and square to the ground. And when I come back up, I'm squeezing through my bum and hamstring to come back up. I do a lot of talking in these videos about glute and hamstring activation. We want those nice and strong so that it takes pressure off our low back, which is going to be more and more taxed throughout our pregnancy. If you can make that a little bit dynamic, you can. Notice my weight stays stacked over the support leg, okay? Even though I've got the chair there for balance, at no point do I shift my weight forward. It's always firmly stacked over top of that bottom leg. Let's switch sides. Nice little reach down and squeeze glute and hamstring to come back up. This is my hip hinge, okay? That's the only pivot point. Make sure the hips are square. Support leg is straight-ish, so not locked, but relatively straight. Hips are square, squeeze glute and hamstring to come back up. And one more. Good. Soon you'll be able to hopefully do that without the assistance of the chair. So that concludes our dynamic warm-up and dynamic stretching. And let's get into our core activation. So we're going to do, to start off, some belly breathing. I want you to sit down on the ground or on your chair if you feel comfortable. Cross-legged, straddle. You can even do kneeling if you want, whatever's most comfortable for you. And what I want you to do is take your hands on that beautiful package you've got in your tummy, and I want you to just focus in on your breathing here, and I want you to inhale and exhale. I want you to figure out what's happening there on the inhale. Is your tummy getting bigger or smaller? What's happening on the exhale naturally? You should notice that on the inhale, the tummy really expands out into your hands, and on the exhale, the belly button comes closer or the belly shrinks. So we're going to try to accentuate those two movements. So on the inhale, really try to expand as much as you can, and on the exhale, try to shrink that belly and draw that belly button into the spine. Again, inhale and exhale, drawing that belly button in. If you know about the Kegel, if you know what a Kegel is, inhale, expand. On the exhale, draw your belly button towards the spine, and at the very end of that movement, also try to incorporate the Kegel. So that's the holding the P muscles or lifting the pelvic floor. So if you think about what muscles you had to activate, if you had to go pee really bad and you didn't want to have an accident, that is your basic pelvic floor. Okay, you don't want to squeeze your bum cheek. It's a little bit different. Okay, play around with that, see if you can figure that out. Great big inhale, expand and exhale. Belly button to spine. Great big inhale and exhale. Belly button to spine. hold, inhale. Last one, and exhale. Belly button to spine. Just that ability to expand helps focus on exaggerating the breath, and then deep transverse activation is what is starting to happen as you draw that belly button in towards the spine. If you can incorporate the Kegel, that's a bonus as well. Next, core movement. Belly breathing from all fours. But I'm going to ask you this time, when you get to the bottom of your breath where you're drawing your belly button into the spine, I want you to just hold for 3 seconds if you can and try to incorporate that Kegel. So once again, great big inhale, expand that belly. Exhale, belly button to spine. Try to hold 1, 2, 3, firing that Kegel as well. And then inhale, release. Expand and exhale. Belly button to spine. So my belly button comes in. I try to fire the Kegel. Hold 1, 2, 3. Inhale, expand. And exhale. Belly button to spine. Hold the Kegel. 1, 2, 3. Inhale. Exhale, belly button to spine. Hold 1, 2, 3 with the Kegel. One more time. Exhale. Expand that belly as much as possible. Inhale. Belly button to spine and hold 1, 2, 3. Very good. Okay. From here, I'm going to give you an option. So if you are sure that you're comfortable lying on your back, it doesn't cause any dizziness or shortness of breath or nausea, and your doctor has said, yeah, no problem, go ahead. If you want, you can do a bit of a hip bridge. And the focus of this, we're going to do a hip bridge to activate the glutes and hamstrings, and as well educate you on how to move through the lower back, which is going to become more and more important through that pregnancy to give you relief in that low back as that gets tight. So if you do not like this, fast forward and I'll show you the very next exercise gives an option. You can do something similar to this without being on your back. So, and you can do both if you have no problem being on your back. So from here, all I want you to do is to push through your heels, and I want you to slowly do a pelvic tuck and then lift all the way up. So we're bridging up. I'm pushing through my heels. I feel my glute and hamstring, and then I want you to sequentially roll down one vertebrae at a time. So I'm still tucking my bum under here, and then I release and I roll out of that. So what you should feel here, I want you in neutral spine, so you've got a tiny gap underneath your back. So what we're doing through this movement, you should notice, if we're now in our start position, I want you to push your low back down, tuck your tailbone under, squeeze your bum, sequentially roll up one vertebrae at a time, hold, squeeze, glutes and hamstring activate, and then slowly peel down one vertebrae at a time. So what we're doing here is we're articulating through that low spine. There's not a huge amount of movement here. Do about 5 more of those as we're just talking here. There's not a huge range of movement through that low spine, but it will be very important for you to understand how to loosen through that low back. And again, push the low back into the ground, draw the belly button in for bonus, push up through those heels, squeeze those glutes, lift up, hold 3, 2, 1, peel down one vertebrae at a time, starting through the upper spine, lowering down, still holding on to those glutes, and then release. Make sure your shoulders stay out of this movement, and again, peeling up one vertebrae at a time, lift, squeeze those glutes at the top, and last one here, peeling down one vertebrae at a time. Okay, now, if you're not comfortable lying on your back, a version of that, a combination movement that you can do, is the cat-cow and a kneeling deadlift. So the cat-cow helps us manipulate this low spine, and we actually integrate the whole spine. So the cat-cow, what I want you to do is start from the top of your head, roll down, roll through the mid-shoulders, and then finish off the low back, tailbone tuck under, and then we go in the reverse direction. So then I release the tailbone, go through the mid-back, shoulders flatten, head comes up, then I go into a very small arch, okay? Now, just double check your form. Shoulders should be stacked right over top of your hands, hips right over top of your knees. We're gonna add some breathing here. So I want you to exhale, head drops, tuck that tailbone under, exhale that belly button to spine, and on the inhale, leading with the tailbone, expand that belly. And if you can't get the breathing, don't worry, just focus more on the articulation of the spine. Exhale, drop, leading through the top of the head. And inhale, expand, coming up. So the focus here, more so on this one, I want to be, instead of the breathing, I want it to be the articulation of the low spine here. That's what I want focusing on most. If you can incorporate the breathing too, that's a bonus for you. Exhale, belly button to spine, and inhale. Ribcage expands, and exhale. Okay, so just look at yourself in the mirror when you do that, and just make sure, for some people, their articulation starts to be more in the upper back, as opposed to, I really want you to try and focus through here. I am moving through the whole spine, but I really want you to try to focus most of your movement through here. Now, bring your hands a little bit closer to your legs, and what I want you to do is to squeeze your glutes and hamstrings to come back up. So this is kind of a variation of getting glute and hamstring activation without lying on your back. You have to very actively think, almost like a pelvic thrust, to pull your body up. So I'm not using my hands to lift. I'm not using my low back. I'm squeezing my glutes and hamstrings, and that's lifting me up. And in workout 2, we'll take this movement and we'll take it from a standing position, and we'll do a standing deadlift, which is more true to life. It's more what you're going to be doing in real life. But this is a good basic starting point here, just to get you starting to focus on glutes and hamstrings. And because we're doing it from a kneeling position, there's a little less load on the back. Let's go 3 more. You really have to actively squeeze glutes and hamstrings to come back up. Do that little pelvic thrust. 2 more. And again. And last one. Perfect. Last posture movement. Grab your chair. And what I want you to do, I just call these seated cobras. So we focused on a little bit of the lower spine. Now we're going to focus on more posture through the upper spine. Throughout your pregnancy, chest is going to get heavier, and even post-pregnancy, you're going to be doing a lot of this, which causes rounded shoulders, which then can cause neck pain, upper back pain, etc., which we don't want. We want nice open chest, nice and strong posture. And we call these seated cobras. So what I want you to do is you're going to let yourself kind of collapse forward into what I would call poor posture. And then from here, you're going to lift up, kind of like a cobra, opening up its hood. Turn your hands back. So your shoulders kind of do a little roll, slide down and back. Hold for 2 seconds, and then release back down. And again, lift up. Small little shoulder roll, and then slide the shoulder blades down and back. So as the shoulders roll backwards, so my shoulders, the actual shoulders roll, and then I focus, these are my blades, they slide down and back, kind of in a downward V position. Slide down and back. If you want to, you can turn those palms back to accentuate that. That's kind of a bonus. So I usually go from palms facing forward, slouching, raise up, little shoulder roll, down and back. Good tall posture. Try to stay neutral through the spine so we're not arching into a low back arch. And again, up. And let's do 2 more. If you want a nice effective way to also get some good movement on this, if you prefer, you can just do a little bit of an articulation of this same movement up against the wall, and then you can actually feel what those shoulder blades are doing. I get that feedback of the wall. I can feel the shoulder blades first roll up slightly and then slide down and back, and then I roll forward. And one last time. Roll, shoulders slide down and back. Nice little basic postural exercise just to get things set properly. So that concludes our core and posture. If you have time, go ahead and do another set, and we'll get into our first functional series. Okay, so first functional movement in our first functional series is a sumo squat. So what I would like you to do is to stand with your toes pointed out. It's going to be very important that you focus on making sure your toes are evenly turned out, and you want to think of connecting your second and third toe to the middle of your knee. a sumo squat is basically keeping your body upright and doing almost like a plie down. I keep my knees pushing back. So the last thing you want is those knees collapsing forward. I keep my knees pushing back. I hold that position and then I come up thinking about squeezing through my glutes or through my adductors, my inner thighs here to come back up, as well as glutes and hamstrings a little bit through quads. The lower you go it's dependent on how comfortable you feel with this movement and how able you are to keep those knees pushed back. So go as low as you feel comfortable, squeeze to come back up. You can do whatever you want with your hands. Oftentimes I feel most comfortable to be here. You should notice as well, as you get down here, maintaining that turnout, keeping those knees pushed out, does make your glutes work here. And then I squeeze my inner thighs to come up. I'm gonna try 12 of those. Squeeze to come back up. So why do we do the sumo squat? It's an effective way to keep the back unloaded. If say you want to pick a baby carrier off the ground, or say you want to pick up your jogging stroller off the ground, it's a good way to get the legs working and not the low back working. Let's go 3 more. 1, 2, last one, and 3. How slow do you want that movement? Actually, the slower you go, the harder it is. So 2 to 3 count down, 2 to 3 count up is ideal if you're trying to build some strength. I wouldn't go quicker than 1 and 1 up. Nice and control, down and up. Now, I should have told you in your warm-up sequence that you do need access to an open wall. So hopefully you have one of those. Most people do if they're living in a home. And what I want you to do is I want you to sit down against the wall with the low back pressed up against the wall. I want the palms facing up, shoulders down and back, and I want you to try and touch your thumbs against the wall, keeping your elbows relatively close to the body. So you want to imagine that you've got an egg. It can be a large egg, no larger than an ostrich egg, please, in between your elbows and your rib cage. You want to keep it there. In other words, I don't want your elbows out here. You won't feel anything. So you got to keep your elbows tucked in close to the body, and you're trying to rotate the thumbs back to touch the wall. If you've got more range and flexibility than me, what you can do if that's too easy, get rid of the thumb and try to press the back circular part of your hand into the wall. Double check as you're doing this movement that your low back isn't gapping off the wall. So this is a good postural movement. Before we do any more challenging upper body loading, I want to make sure that your postural muscles are nice and strong. So that's why we're focusing on these basic type movements. 2 more reps. That'll take us to 12 to 15 reps. Last one here. Great. Okay. Now, what I would like you to do is to go back and repeat your sumo squat and wall external shoulder rotations at least 1 more, if not 2 more times before we go on to functional series number 2. Series number 2, what you're going to need access to is your chair. And we're going to start off with doing a hamstring activation movement. So this isn't necessarily what I would call a functional movement, but we're using this to build onto our actual functional movement, which is going to be a squat. So what I want you to make sure your chair is nice and sturdy. It's not going to flip forward. I want you to lift up nice and tall out of those shoulders, so we're not slouching or sagging here. So even that in its own is going to be a little bit tough exercise for some people. And what I want you to do here is let the hips drop, and then I want you to pelvic thrust up, feeling your glutes and hamstrings work, and then relax down and thrust up. So double check yourself in the mirror here. I'm really having to lift out of my hands, and I'm pushing up. Squeeze glutes and hamstrings to come up. If you find that that's a little bit too challenging, what you can do is come from a seated position and thrust up, hold 1, 2, and then go back down to your seated position. Hold, thrust up, 1, 2, and back down. Try to lift your hips as high as you can, opening up through that chest, squeeze glutes and hamstrings. And again, thrust up, hold, 1, 2, push your feet into the ground. And 2 more, thrust up, hold, 1, 2, and last one, push, thrust up, and relax. Remember that feeling of glute and hamstring activating through the movement. So now we're going to do a basic chair squat, but I'm going to ask you to incorporate that pelvic thrust. So go ahead, touch down, and then as you come up, squeeze glutes and hamstrings, there's that pelvic thrust to come up. So I'm trying to trick your mind into using these guys to lift up instead of using your quads. So as you squat, hands counterbalance forward, knees stay behind the toes. I sit down and then I squeeze glutes and hamstrings to come up. We're gonna do 15 repetitions, okay? I'm showing you the easier option. If you want to and you're comfortable with the squat, I'm gonna encourage you to get rid of that chair, keep that range of motion, but still glutes and hamstrings squeeze to come up. Good squat, squeeze to come up. From the front, make sure toes are tracking forward. You can push those knees out a little bit to help you get deeper, and then squeeze glutes and hamstrings to come up. Knees can push out just a little bit as long as your feet are tracking forward. And I'm showing you pretty deep. Go whatever's comfortable for you. Please feel free to stick with the chair if you want. And back up. Belly button drawn in just a little bit. And back up. 3 more. 1, 2, and last one. 3. Over to your chair. We're going to do something called a chair mountain climber. So from this position, I just want to show you something here for the shoulder blades. When you are in any sort of push-up position, which will be here, what you want to make sure is that your shoulders don't collapse. So you want to push out of the heels of your hands. So maybe even try this with your feet forward a little bit so you don't have as much weight loaded. Allow your shoulder blades to collapse, which is what we don't want. And then push out of the heels of your hands. Try to feel those shoulder blades separate. And that's the position, that separated shoulder blade position, that you want to be in when you hold a push-up position. So for some of you, with this movement, this is as far as it's going to go. Shoulder stacked over top of the hands, nice tight body, belly button drawn in. So we're trying to maintain the belly button drawn in here. You're going to hold for 10 seconds. If you find you're capable of doing those 10-second holds, and that's about as challenging as you can do, then just step in and out of that movement, doing those 10-second push-up plank holds. If you find that you can do that with good form, belly button drawn in, shoulder blades not collapsed, then you can try a mountain climber. What we're going to try is 10 mountain climbers. Belly button stays in nice and tight. So this requires some upper body strength here, core activation. The higher you bring your knee, the more challenging that is through the core. Make sure though that as you bring your knee forward, you don't collapse your hips. So you're maintaining your hip position in space, which is a nice line from the shoulder, hip to the knee. Bring that toe up. I lost count. I'm going to say we've got 6 more. 1. So it's 10 on each side. 2. Belly button drawn in. 3. Now these are just guidelines. If you can only do 10 of these, great, no problem. Do as many as you feel comfortable. That's challenging you, but that allows you to maintain good form. Last one here, and relax. Okay, shake everything out. Go back and repeat that sequence. So if you recall, that functional sequence was the chair hip bridge. So your option there, probably best for most people, is to lift up, squeeze, hold, and then come back down. Lift up, squeeze, hold, make sure your chair doesn't flip forward, and squeeze down. Then your second movement is your squat, and then your third movement is your chair mountain climber. Go ahead and repeat that another 1 to 2 times, and then join me for your final stretches. Okay, final stretches. What I would like you to do is to sit down on the ground, and we're going to do a straddle stretch first. So what I want you to do is sit up nice and tall. So we work those adductors in the sumo squat. Sit up nice and tall. Spread open your legs to a position that is as comfortable for you as you can find, where you just feel a gentle pull in through here. And for some of you, that's all we're going to do. We're just going to sit in this position, toes and knees straight up, and we're just going to hold that. If you have more flexibility and you feel you can reach forward a little bit from this position, go ahead and do so. If you have a lot more flexibility and you can get your chest right on the ground and that feels good, it feels good through your low back, go ahead and do that as well. And we're just going to hold 3, 2. So we're going to hold each stretch that I give you about 30 seconds. Goal in the ideal world would you be holding these stretches for 1 minute to 2 minutes a piece. So in the interest of keeping these videos at a reasonable length, I'm not going to hold for longer than 30 seconds. But if you have the time, please do so. Now from here, what I want you to do is to walk over to one side, let the head drop, or again, if you find that this is as far as you can go, then just walk over to the side. If you do choose to reach forward, do take care to make sure that this bum cheek or sit bone stays on the ground. And again, just check in with your body. Pay attention throughout all these stretches. Does it feel good? Do you feel a mild, comfortable stretch? Does it feel like a really great release, and that you should put that in the back of your mind for a nice little a little repertoire of stretches that would be your favorite go-to stretches to give you that release you need as the body gets tight. So always thinking about that. If the stretch doesn't feel good, check in with your body. Are you pushing too far? Do you have the position right? Is there something you're doing wrong that you need to correct your form? All the stretches should feel relatively comfortable. Keep the left sit bone on the ground, rotating down, and holding. Knees are pointed towards the ceiling, knees and toes. And for me, I'm feeling this stretch both in through this left hamstring and in through the left low back area, quadratus lumborum back here. 3, 2, 1, and release. And we'll go into a figure 4 stretch. Now, if you have a rope tie or a firm elastic available to you, it can help with this stretch if you're not super flexible. So this is just an option. You can go into a figure 4. So I've got this foot at a bent position, and then I can loop that elastic over top of that leg and then gently pull down. You don't need it. You can just be reaching here, or some of you may have the flexibility to reach towards your toe. Some people, even if they do have that flexibility, just like that little addition of holding on. So you can choose whatever feels right for you. Let the head drop and hold. So again, you're going to feel this either in the hamstring here or the low back, depending on where you're tight. Since we already kind of hit those areas a little bit in the straddle stretch, I'm not going to hold this one quite as long. I'll switch to the other side. Up nice and tall. Where this foot is positioned is a little bit dependent on where it feels most comfortable for you. It can be just slightly below the knee, at the knee, or just slightly above. Go with what feels comfortable. And holding. So today was our first workout. The movements, especially the functional movements, are going to get more demanding, more challenging. So you can build and progress. When you are working out through your pregnancy, the goal for loading heavier and heavier, which you're not really going to get in the beginner levels, isn't necessarily a focus. But there's nothing wrong with working to improve your movement patterns and your coordination and your ability to activate certain muscles throughout your pregnancy, because that will become very helpful in how you position your body in safe ways when you are delivering, and as well, most importantly, post delivery, when you're going to be having to load your baby and all the baby paraphernalia that comes with it. That's when probably some of the most challenging part comes. And I'm sure a lot of you are like me, you already have a child, and you're going to have to deal with both a pregnant body and hauling a little one around as it is. So here we're doing a hip flexor stretch. I've got my back toe tucked under, and I'm pushing my back hip into the ground. I'm gonna choose in this one to keep my chest forward. I'm kind of relaxing on this knee. This knee is tracking straight down. I'm making sure that my knee is not in front of my toe. So what I mean by that, you shouldn't be in that position there. So my foot is forward far enough so that the knee is dropped a little bit behind the toe. And you should feel just a comfortable stretch in that back hip flexor. For some of you, I'm going to give a little bit of an option here. This requires more flexibility. It may get into the hip a little bit. If you feel you can bring your inside hand in, and you can either opt to go one elbow down or 2 elbows down, go ahead and do so. Again, that's quite advanced. So this is level 1. With stretching, I find you can have a beginner level exerciser, but who maybe is just more flexible or has done a lot of yoga, and you may be able to go a little bit more advanced. So I'll try to give you some options. So if you do choose to go a little bit more advanced in this stretch, there's kind of level 2 and level 3 would be both hands on the ground. Now this transfers the stretch away from that back hip and more into the top hip on the outside. So you just kind of get a little variation there. And go ahead with what feels comfortable for you. And we're going to swap over to the other side. So right leg comes forward. Again, find that ideal position where the knee is not in front of that toe, but it's probably hovering mid-foot. I've got my shoelaces down. I'm actively pushing the back shoelaces into the ground so I feel my back hip. Make sure everyone stay in that position, no matter how flexible you are, to focus on that back hip flexor. Releasing your back hip flexors will be very important throughout your pregnancy as the low back starts to go into a little bit more of an arch as the tummy pulls it forward. That also pulls on your hip flexors, so we want to make sure that those stay nice and loose and limber and not over tightened. That can release your low back as well. So now that we've held this for a little bit, this is where you can opt to go into your level 2 or level 3. So that's outside elbow, then inside elbow down. You may notice you're like me, you have one side that's tighter than the other. I can only get the outside elbow down on this side. So you go always to your own level. Don't worry about competing beside your neighbor if you're doing this with a friend or what I look like. Listen to my cues, but then listen to your body most importantly as to what it's capable of. Okay, so we've done hip flexor, we've done hamstring, we've done a little bit of glute, we've done inner thighs or adductors. Let's get that chair and we'll do our modified chair stretch here. So cross one leg over the other. So go with whatever level feels comfortable for you. And then from here, if you want to increase the stretch, you can drop down. So there's level 1 that I'm going to show you. So our option there is to do 30 seconds on each side from a chair, cross leg, hinging forward, so you're feeling a nice stretch in through that glute. If you have more flexibility and you want to keep that from a floor position, then what you can do is take that into a double position. You can have your cross-legged from this position here and then gently leaning forward. This is obviously more advanced. Only go with what's comfortable for you. You should feel comfortable, pull through the hips, and you can choose to do 30 seconds aside. In other videos, I've shown this guy here, which was another option, but I don't know about you, my belly's getting bigger, and as I pull that knee towards me, sometimes puts uncomfortable pressure on the belly. If you feel comfortable doing that one, you want to do that one, great, no problem. And we'll switch over to the other side. Again, or your option is doing it from the chair. Try to keep your ankles just a little bit flexed or activated here. And holding for about 30 seconds. And we'll just do one more stretch today, and that's going to be your chest stretch. And we'll find a wall for that one. And we're going to hold 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and release. So for this last stretch, you're going to need access to a doorway. I'm going to give you 2 options. One is the low hand chest stretch option, so you push your hand up against the doorway, pivot your feet away. That one's kind of the, what I would call easier level. To get a deeper stretch, you bring the hand up to 90 degrees. The caveat with that one, if you have any shoulder issues or you feel any sort of tension in your shoulder, as you do that, go to the low hand option. In either case, make sure the shoulders are set down and back. Make sure you're not leaning awkwardly. The shoulders are nicely stacked over the hips. And make sure as well that you're not overarching through the back. Feels very nice and very important to do a chest opener. So the postural movements help give you the strength to hold the chest open. However, if the muscles get tight, you're having to work the strength of the postural muscles against tight muscles, which is kind of not a losing battle, but you're making yourself work harder than you need to. So if you can have both strong postural muscles with healthy, limber chest muscles, then you've got a winning scenario. And then take it over to the other side. So again, you've got your low chest option, stretch, or your high, or you can do, of course, a combination of both if that works for you. And hold for that 30 seconds. So your ideal is to do do the types of workouts that I am posting, do them 2 to 3 times a week, combined with whatever other active activities that you enjoy, walking, power walking, treadmill. For some people, biking might still be comfortable. For some people, jogging might still be comfortable at this point. Every body's a little bit different. You just have to listen to your body. Playing with your kids in the park, of course. You have kids, your nieces and nephews. Release. And that's it. So I encourage you to repeat this workout several times until you feel comfortable. Workout 2 will be a slight progression with some advancements and some variations of what we did in workout number 1. Hope you have a great day.